They were gentlemen. I mean, they weren't assholes. They were hard-working men.
Sam Elliott never chased the spotlight. He didn't need to. With a voice like weathered oak and eyes full of Western silence, he built a legendary career on presence, not noise. For decades, he kept his opinions close, letting others play the game of Hollywood politics while he stuck to the trail. But now, at 80, the man who personified the American cowboy has broken that silence. And what he revealed shook the foundations of an industry built on flattery and masks. He named names, 7 of them. 1. Benedict Cumberbatch, the cowboy in costume. The controversy began in 2021 when Sam Elliott, usually reserved in public opinion, delivered a scorching critique of The Power of the Dog, the Oscar-winning Western directed by Jane Campion and led by British actor Benedict Cumberbatch. Appearing on a podcast, Elliott didn't mince words. He dismissed the film as pretentious, disconnected, and worst of all, inauthentic. But the sharpest blade was aimed at Cumberbatch himself. What the hell does this Brit know about the American West? Elliott asked, his voice laced with disbelief. To most actors, a role is an opportunity. To Sam Elliott, especially in a Western, a role is a responsibility. And in his view, Cumberbatch had taken the role of a rancher, a man shaped by land and silence, and turned it into something theatrical, distant. Despite Cumberbatch's reported efforts, method acting, learning ranch work, staying in character, Elliott wasn't impressed. None of it, he said, could replace lived experience. The quiet grief, the hard soil, the code of the West that can't be taught. He treated it like a costume drama, Elliott said privately, according to one insider, not a life. The backlash came fast. Critics accused Elliott of gatekeeping, of being hostile to modern interpretations of masculinity. Others praised his honesty, but he stood firm. He didn't backtrack. He didn't edit his words to please the press. To him, the American West isn't a genre. It's not just horses and hats. It's a state of being, built on grit, self-reliance, and unspoken honor. And The Power of the Dog, for all its acclaim, had crossed a line. It had stylized the cowboy, softened him, dissected him, in a way that Elliott simply couldn't accept. Cumberbatch never responded directly, but sources close to him say he was hurt, deeply. After all, he had given his all to the role. But in Sam Elliott's world, effort isn't enough if you miss the soul. 2. Nicolas Cage, all flash, no fire. In Sam Elliott's world, acting is a slow burn, not a spectacle. It's what simmers beneath the surface, the moment held just a second too long, the silence that says more than a scream ever could. That's why Nicolas Cage, with all his chaotic brilliance, his eccentric performances, and his headline-making energy, represented everything Elliott distrusted about modern Hollywood. When the two crossed paths in Ghost Rider, 2007, audiences might have expected sparks. What they got behind the scenes was a gulf of philosophy, bridged only by professionalism, and barely that. Cage brought the same energy he always had, wide-eyed mania, sudden emotional explosions, and that unpredictable electricity that made directors either worship or fear him. Elliott, by contrast, was calm, focused, and steady, the embodiment of classic stoicism. They shared scenes, but never a bond. Later, without naming names, Elliott would criticize actors who make it about themselves, who twist a story to serve their own ego rather than the truth of the character. People close to him say there was no mystery about who he meant. More firework than flame. Elliott once told a friend, describing Cage's style in a single devastating phrase. Where Cage erupted, Elliott watched. Where Cage pushed emotion to the edge of absurdity, Elliott let a single glance carry the weight. He saw Cage's fame, the Oscar wins, the cult following, but none of it swayed him. Because to Sam Elliott, Cage's acting wasn't truth. It was theater. Loud, erratic, and hollow. This wasn't bitterness. It was heartbreak. Heartbreak at seeing the quiet, disciplined craft he loved being overrun by actors who turned every scene into a circus. Cage, in Elliott's eyes, was less a performer and more a one-man spectacle. And for Elliott, that wasn't brilliance. It was betrayal. 3. Kevin Costner, the cowboy who never got dirty. If you ask Sam Elliott what makes a real cowboy, he won't talk about hats or horses. He'll talk about silence, grit, the way a man walks after miles of dust, or how he stares into the distance when words won't do. To Elliott, the West isn't a backdrop. It's a way of life. And that's why Kevin Costner, polished, powerful, Hollywood to the core, never passed the authenticity test. When Costner starred in Wyatt Earp and later dominated screens in Yellowstone, critics hailed him as a modern cowboy king. But Elliott wasn't buying it. He watched the shows. He saw the boots, the barns, the brooding looks. And still, something didn't sit right. "It's too clean," he told a friend. "Too smooth. The cattle don't even look like they stink." To Elliott, Costner's West felt like a theme park version of the real thing. All aesthetic, no ache. His characters wore the costume well, but lacked the scars beneath. The boots were spotless. The grit was airbrushed. Even the silence, that sacred stillness of the frontier, felt scripted. It wasn't about acting ability. Elliott knew Costner was talented, but he saw him as a product of image, not truth. A star, not a storyteller. That's why, when Elliott was invited to do a cameo in Yellowstone, he declined without hesitation. No press statement, no drama, just a quiet, deliberate no. "Soap opera in boots," he called it. And that phrase said everything. Elliott wasn't interested in rebranding the West for a new generation. He didn't want to be part of something that in his eyes glorified the surface and ignored the soul. To him, the cowboy wasn't a symbol. He was a man. Flawed, silent, honorable. And nothing about Yellowstone or Costner's performance felt real enough to honor that truth. There was no feud, no shouting match. But insiders say the chill between them ran deep. Because for Elliott, Costner didn't just play the cowboy wrong. He represented an entire generation of storytelling that forgot where it came from. 4. Jared Leto, the carnival disguised as craft. For Sam Elliott, the truest acting never announces itself. It doesn't scream. It doesn't chase headlines. It slips into a story so naturally, you forget you're watching a performance. That's why Jared Leto, with his wild transformations, headline-grabbing antics, and obsessive method acting, felt to Elliott like a walking contradiction. Not an artist, a spectacle. Leto earned acclaim for roles that demanded physical and emotional extremes. He gained weight, lost it, stayed in character off camera, and even sent rats to his co-stars on Suicide Squad. To some, this was genius, dedication, boldness. To Elliott, he's acting like acting is a carnival, he reportedly said, with a shake of his head. Elliott saw Leto's method not as immersion, but as performance beyond the screen. Public stunts dressed up as commitment. Art turned into attention-seeking. The two never officially worked together, though they almost did. Elliott was loosely attached to a project that later pivoted around Leto's involvement. When Sam got wind of the shift, he quietly walked away. No complaint, just a silent retreat. That silence was his statement. He wasn't threatened by Leto. It wasn't jealousy. It was a rejection of what the industry was becoming, a place where headlines mattered more than honesty, where an actor's off-screen narrative sometimes overshadowed the character on screen. Leto, in Elliott's eyes, was a product of that shift. To Elliott, the best actors disappear. They whisper rather than roar. Their presence doesn't demand attention, it earns it. Leto's presence? Loud, unavoidable, and worst of all, in Elliott's view, empty. He doesn't trust the story, Elliott once said in private. He has to add fireworks, even when the sky's already full of stars. It wasn't personal. It was philosophical. And for Sam Elliott, who built his legacy on quiet truth, Leto's Hollywood felt like a foreign land, one he refused to set foot in. 5. Ashton Kutcher, the actor trained by fame. When Sam Elliott walked onto the set of The Ranch, he wasn't looking for validation. He wasn't there to mentor or impress. He came to do what he always does: show up, speak the truth, and disappear into the role. But from day one, the tension with Ashton Kutcher hung in the air. Kutcher, known for his boyish charm, sitcom one-liners, and Silicon Valley ventures, was riding a wave of mainstream fame. He had fans. He had followers. But to Elliott, none of that mattered if the work didn't hold weight. And Kutcher's work, while enthusiastic, felt light. "He's a decent guy," Elliott told someone on set, "but no real actor." Those words weren't spoken in anger. They were spoken like a man reading the weather. Calmly, certainly, with no expectation it would change. Elliott believed in craft earned over time, bit parts, silent roles, years of anonymity and sweat that eventually forged something real. Kutcher, to him, was the opposite, a product of speed, viral moments, and social media charm. Publicly, Kutcher called Elliott a mentor. He praised his discipline and legacy. But Elliott never echoed that affection. He stayed professional, but removed. No dinners, no long talks, just work. One crew member remembered seeing Elliott, after a take, watching Kutcher walk off set. He shook his head, quietly muttered, "He's playing a version of someone he saw on TV." To Elliott, that was the heart of it. Kutcher didn't bring life to the role. He brought a performance of a performance, a copy of a copy. Still, Elliott never sabotaged a scene, never raised his voice, because the silence was enough. It was the kind of silence that comes from someone who knows he's standing at the edge of a dying tradition, surrounded by actors raised on algorithms. In another time, they might have found common ground. But Elliott saw Kutcher as the symbol of everything Hollywood was becoming. Quick, marketable, shallow. And for a man who held the line for decades, this wasn't just disappointing. It was heartbreaking. Nasher 6. Jane Campion, a beautiful film that broke all the rules. Most of the actors on Sam Elliott's list rubbed him the wrong way on set or on screen. But with Jane Campion, it was something more fundamental, something almost existential. When Elliott spoke out against the power of the dog, it wasn't just about a film he didn't like. It was about a vision of the West that felt alien to him, a reimagination that stripped away everything he believed made the cowboy sacred. And at the center of that vision was director Jane Campion. Her film was hailed as brave, intimate, psychologically rich. But to Elliott, it was theatrical, stylized, and most of all, disconnected. She wasn't from Montana or Wyoming. She was from New Zealand. And to Elliott, that distance mattered. "She doesn't know the West," he said bluntly. He didn't deny Campion's talent. He didn't even question her technical mastery. What he questioned was her right, her authority, to tell a story about a life she had never lived. In Elliott's eyes, her West was all metaphor and mood, but no dirt, no sweat, no code. She dressed it up, he told a close friend. But she didn't understand it. Campion, never one to stay quiet, responded publicly. While accepting her Directors Guild Award, she fired back. "He's not a cowboy. He's an actor." Those words landed like a gunshot in a saloon. She wasn't just defending her film. She was questioning the very identity Elliott had spent decades embodying. It was a cultural clash, a gendered one, a generational one. But more than anything, it was a clash of truths. Campion believed in challenging masculinity, in peeling back the myths of the frontier. Elliott believed those myths were built on real men, real suffering, and deserved reverence, not revision. Critics accused Elliott of sexism, of being threatened by a female director daring to explore a world he felt belonged to men. But to him, it was never about gender. It was about lived experience. He didn't want the cowboy turned into a metaphor. He wanted him remembered as a man, bruised, quiet, and honest. That's why Campion made the list. Not because she failed, but because in his view, she succeeded in telling a story that never should have been told that way. 7. Jeff Bridges, The Quietest Heartbreak. Among the 7 names on Sam Elliott's list, one stands apart. Not because of a fight, not because of on-set tension or artistic conflict, but because of something far more painful: loss. Jeff Bridges wasn't just a co-star, he was a kindred spirit. When they worked together in The Big Lebowski, their chemistry was effortless. One was the stranger, slow, deliberate, mythic. The other, the dude, loose, soulful, beautifully flawed. Fans loved them as a pair. But what they didn't see was how real the bond felt off-screen. They came from the same school, old souls in a changing world. They understood the weight of silence, the power of presence, and the dignity of stillness. They weren't just actors. They were men who had walked the same spiritual trail. But something shifted. It started small. After Bridges won the Oscar for Crazy Heart, his presence in the industry began to change. More polished interviews, more red carpets, more of what Elliott quietly called Hollywood shine. He didn't change overnight, a longtime friend of Elliott said, but Sam felt something go cold. Elliott never called Bridges out. He never raised his voice. But those close to him saw it, the pain of watching someone you admired drift, not because of betrayal, but because of success. In a later interview, Elliott offered a cryptic line: "Some folks change, others just show who they always were." He never named names. He didn't have to. The silence between Elliott and Bridges grew louder with time. No appearances together, no mutual praise, no more quiet toasts backstage, just absence. Elliott never said he hated Bridges. In fact, hate would have been easier. But what he felt was harder to carry, a kind of spiritual disappointment. A heartbreak that had no villain, only distance. To Sam Elliott, loyalty isn't negotiable. When it fades, he doesn't argue. He just walks away. And when he looks back at Bridges now, it's not with bitterness, it's with sadness. Because some bonds don't break with a fight, they just quietly unravel. Final words. A man who drew the line. This wasn't a list of enemies, it was a list of departures. Departures from truth, from integrity, from the code Sam Elliott has followed since his first day on a dusty soundstage decades ago. He never screamed, he never chased headlines, but at 80, he finally spoke, not to provoke, but to preserve. He named the actors who, to him, symbolize a fading industry, one where performances matter less than personas, where spectacle drowns out silence, where the cowboy is no longer a man of honor, but a costume with lighting. Elliott doesn't expect everyone to agree. That's not why he spoke. He did it for the code, for the legacy, for the kind of storytelling that whispers rather than shouts. In a world moving too fast, he remains a man of slow truths, a lone figure on the frontier, still standing, still silent, still drawing the line.